Welcome to the Dowden Podcast. I'm your host, the official CRG, and today we are going to talk about how you can get out of that constant loop and really start to take control. But before we get started, make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. That way you don't miss any weekly episodes and posts. You can find video of this episode strictly on YouTube, but the audio everywhere else. Now, when it comes to that constant loop, it can be anything from how you feel to the job you work at. No matter what it is, we all feel like things just aren't going our way and are really just starting to merge together. Now, yes, we do have bad days, and sometimes we even have bad weeks. But if you've been feeling like this for a while, you know you're in a loop, then this episode might be helpful because I myself have been in multiple loops before. And today we are going to talk about what I have personally done in order to get myself out of them. Because you see, just a couple months ago, I found myself in one of those loops. I was struggling with the podcast because I would sometimes put 8 hours or 7 hours in at my 9 to 5 and then come home and then put 8 to 7 hours in on my podcast. I was doing 15 to 16 hour days 5 to 6 days a week. And it literally got to a point where things were blending together. Everything just started to merge. I was losing motivation. I was doubting what I was doing. And because of that, I found myself in that loop and really started to get burnt out. And this went on for like a solid 3 to 4 weeks until I finally realized, like, hey, if I don't sit here and make a change right now, I'm not going to be able to do that 9 to 5 in my podcast. I'm not going to be able to do my dream because I was slacking during my 9 to 5. I wasn't performing at my best. I wasn't greeting customers how I should. I wasn't doing the work as efficient and as quick as I know I could. And when it came to my podcast, I wasn't showing up. I wasn't being on time. I wasn't staying dedicated. And I was slowly losing my dream because I was stuck in that loop. So once I realized that I then had to change, I then went and figured out what I could and couldn't control. Because even if I could just give myself 1 to 2 hours of free time a day to just decompress, to just let me do what I need to do, then maybe that would help. So that's exactly what I went and did. I went and I made myself a schedule. I only started working on certain days or certain hours, and I made sure to stick to it in order to get myself out of that loop. But even when I did that, and even when I gave myself that free time, I still found myself stuck. I still didn't have that motivation and drive. I still didn't want to get up and do the podcast. I still didn't want to get up and work. And the thing is that I thought that would fix it. I thought that would fix my loop because I genuinely thought that that time was my problem. So then I sat there and I really started to dig deep. I asked myself, is it really the job? Is it really the podcast? Is it something that I'm not even thinking about that's deep down that I've put away for years? Because that does happen. When you don't handle past situations and you just throw them away, hide them, they're going to come back up. We don't know when, but it's going to happen. So then I started to think, maybe is it a past situation? And when I sat there, I reevaluated. I kept digging and digging because I wanted that change. I then realized that it wasn't only the time, but it was my overall motivation for the podcast. Because I'm going to be God's honest. When I first started this podcast, I wanted to educate people, I wanted to spread motivation, but I also wanted quick and easy money. And the second I realized that, hey, that quick and easy money isn't realistic, you have to work, you have to grind. It's going to take time. Hell, it might even take years. I believe that that's what really threw me in the loop. And in order to get out of that, I had to change my overall motivation. And that's exactly what I did. Now, obviously, your situation is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have your different loops. You're going to have these different things. It might not be exactly the same as mine. But at the end of the day, a loop is a loop and you cannot let it win. You have to take control and learn to beat it. Because when you're stuck in that loop, it will keep going. You're going to keep doing the same thing. You're going to keep having those same feelings. You're going to keep having that self doubt and not wanting to get up because you're not doing anything to change it. You really have to take action in order to get out of these loops. So, if you're in that loop right now, or you do go through them, the very first thing I want you to do when it happens is just take a step back and try and figure out why. Because if you can find that main source, if you can figure out why these loops are happening, why you're stuck in it, more than likely you can eliminate it entirely. But if you can't, you're looking, you don't understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling, I want you to try and understand your true intentions and motivation behind the things you're doing. Because you could be like me. You could think it's something else, but deep down, it's something that you have been burying or something that you have been dreading. Or maybe it's the motivation to why you even started it, like it was with me. So, the very first thing I want you to do when these loops happen is just take a step back and try and figure out why. Then once you took a step back, you tried to figure out why, you tried to see those intentions and that true motivation behind the things you do. I then want you to challenge those negative thoughts and try and have a growth mindset. Now, what I mean by challenge those negative thoughts and have a growth mindset is that when those things happen, when those thoughts come in, when you start to overthink, when you start to have that self doubt, I want you to go and challenge them. I want you to tell them no. I want you to try and talk yourself out of it. I want you to try and build yourself up because those negative thoughts are what's probably feeding that loop. You're listening to them, you're feeding into that self doubt, you're thinking you can't do this. But if you break it, you understand that, hey, you have control of your mind. If things are going bad, you can tell it no. There's multiple times where I will have a thought and I will just sit there and tell it, no, you're not going to sit here and ruin my day. You're not going to do this. And I take control. So that's what I mean by challenging your mind. And what I mean by that growth mindset is that when it comes to those obstacles and those challenges, you need to start viewing them as opportunities to learn and grow because that is the only way to beat those loops. You have to take control and act on them. It's going to take time. It's not going to be easy, but that's like everything else in this world. But if you're tired of those loops, you're tired of going through them once a month, once a week, 3 times a week, then you need to start challenging them and start being positive when that negativity comes through. And last but not least, when it comes to getting out of that loop, I want you to try and set clear and realistic goals for yourself. Because when you set those goals, it helps you stay focused and dedicated. You're going to keep working until you make that goal real. Because when you have a 9 to 5, if you're working on a business, you're building content, and you don't have a goal, it is very easy to lose motivation. You're going to sit there and ask yourself, why am I getting paid $300 for 30 or 40 hours a week? I'm busting my butt and I'm barely reaching that engagement. But if you set those little goals, by the end of the month, I want to have this much in savings. By the end of the month, I want to reach this amount of people. Because those goals, like I said, are what's going to help you stay dedicated, motivated, and ultimately pull you out of that loop because you're now not focused on that negativity. You're now not focused on the things that were bringing you down, but what you can now achieve because you are striving for that goal. But when it comes to these loops overall, I want you to understand that it's going to take time, but more importantly, you have to take action. Find a way to see the loop, find a way to make a change and start taking control because nobody is going to pull you out of this loop. You have to do it yourself. If you're tired of them happening all the time, you're tired of falling in line and having things just feel like the same thing over and over, find a way to make a change. Stop the excuses. Stop saying that I can't or that I don't see it and start learning. Start finding opportunities. Start trying to figure out why these things are happening and then find a way to stop it. You are in control of your life and your mind. Yes, things are going to be hard. Sometimes your mind's going to race. You're going to overthink. But if you really sit down with yourself and say, hey, you're not going to ruin my day. You're not going to do this. I am in control. You can pull yourself out of damn near anything you are fighting mentally. But with that said, today's quote is by Stephen Furtick. He once said, "The thoughts you keep in a loop determine the direction of your life." I appreciate you tuning in. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And this is the Dowden Podcasts.